Welcome to the warehouse. We've now come outside, as you can see. Got the old fleece on. It's a little bit cooler out here than it is in the still house. Quite warm in there, a little bit colder out here at this time of year. So the spirit, as we saw off the stills. Now we're collecting a high cut, as I said, in the still room. We actually take the cut off at about 72, 73% alcohol. We're going to bring that down to 68, 68.5% for cask filling, so we fill at very high strength. We typically fill American bourbon barrels such as these. Now the ones we use at present come from the Jim Beam distillery at Clement Springs in Kentucky, so we're using ex-Jim Beam casks here. We do also use a little bit of new wood at this distillery, which is relatively unusual in the UK at the moment. More people are starting to experiment with it. We started to do it a few years ago. I felt the spirit was light enough and sweet enough to be able to take the kind of complexity that new wood gives. It's quite aggressive, gives a lot of colour, gives a lot of tannins, but we felt that the spirit would be able to handle that. And we've had some success with that. We've got a couple of whiskies out at the moment that have been matured in virgin oak that are working really well, so people like that flavour. But typically, the ex-bourbon casks work really well for us. We have a variety of casks. We have some sherry casks. We have a few wine casks, but just kind of playing around really, not a massive amount of volume, tend to be sort of single cask bottlings. I think you guys at Masters of Malt have played around with a couple of those. Typically for us, the bourbon cask works really, really well, just gives us what we want in the whiskey. So a very light, fruity style, as I was talking about when we were in the still room. So we cut to about 68, 68.5 into the barrel. We let it rest, as you know, we don't do anything. As you can see, we're racking 5 high in here, traditional dunnage style warehousing. Whatever we're doing, we rack it high. So top of the stack in the summer gets really, really hot. We're looking at, I mean, in Norfolk, we get cold winters, we get hot summers. The climate here is quite aggressive. We've measured temperatures certainly outside in the yard, not so much in the warehouse, but in the yards here. In the winter over the past few years, we're hitting -10, -15 degrees, pretty cold for the UK, and we can be peaking at +30, 35 in the summer, so quite extremes of temperature. So we get this massive swing, really aiding maturation. In the warehouse, summer temperatures, bottom of the stack here, we're looking at around 16 degrees. By the time we get to the top, we're looking at around 28 degrees. So there's this huge temperature variance as we go up the rack. That's affecting the maturation a little bit. But we get very, very consistent maturation in the warehouse. I mean, I could probably tell you now, just through experience, someone gave me a sample, I could tell you whether it's 3 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. I can just do that by smelling it and tasting it. I typically know that. Obviously we're now into the stage because we, as a young distillery, we had to sell products, so we have some refill casks on site. So the refill bourbons are working really, really nicely, giving us lots of complex fruity aromas. So slightly subdued on the tannins, but some really, really lovely fruity aromas coming through. So into the bond, into the barrel, we walk away. We leave it alone and we just let nature work its magic. I typically, now I've got the experience of doing it, as I say, new distillery, you don't know what's going to happen at 5, you don't know what's going to happen at 8, you don't know what's going to happen at 9, 10 years old. Now I've got that kind of knowledge, I can pretty much predict what's going to happen, but we're not at 15 years yet, so who knows what it's going to taste like at 15? Who knows what a first fill bourbon, who knows what a refill bourbon will taste like at 15 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old? You know, and that's part of the fun of it, that's part of the journey. So when I'm kind of creating whiskies, for me this is what whiskey making's about. This is where the magic happens. This is where, for me, the skill is. You know, running the distillery, operating the stills, that's one thing. But actually producing a glass of whiskey, a bottle of whiskey that someone wants to drink, that's a completely different skill set for me. And this is where it happens. To be able to go, this is a first fill bourbon cask, this is what it tastes like, this is a refill, this is a sherry cask, this is that. How can I meld those flavors together? It's like a chef taking different ingredients and combining them to produce a plate of food. And that's, for me, that's ultimately what whiskey's about. It's about taking flavor. Flavor is where it's at. And taking those flavors and marrying them and trying to produce those complex flavor profiles. You can't produce something that appeals to everyone. You know, I don't think it's physically possible to do it. I think what you need to do is recognise where your strengths are and say, this is about flavour, this whiskey will appeal to these people, this whiskey will appeal to these people, and this whiskey will appeal to these people. And I think for me, as I've said, this is where it's at. This, you know, in the bond, in the warehouse, in the maturation, I mean, again, you can't smell it in here. On a cold day like today, it's a little bit cool today, the day we're filming. It's an amazing aroma in here. You can still smell it. I can smell it, and I'm used to being in here. So for anyone that's not used to coming into a distillery, the smell in here is amazing. You know, the angel share, the evaporation we get here is pretty high. We're looking at around 5% annually, you know, and that's quite high. Again, as I said, the summer temperatures are very warm, so a lot of evaporation. It's aiding flavour production. We get a lot of oxidation in the cask. And just bringing those flavours together. So yeah, basically this is where it's at.